Ксенечка, я люблю тебя.
Hear my plea to the fallen, leave me to be with the broken one last time before I go. Hold the last burning ember, let us never surrender. May we rise up to the glory and the fall. For the weak and the broken, for the lost and forsaken, let us never surrender. May we rise up to the call. For the weak and the broken, for the lost and forsaken.
All right, Orc Hunters, check on in to the stream. We are live on Facebook and YouTube here, September 20th, 2022, day 210 of the war in Ukraine. I'm Andy Mercado from Mercado Media. We've been covering this war since the beginning of the invasion on February 24th, on the night it began. So we've been covering it since then. Check on into the live stream. Comment where you're tuned in from, what city, what state, where in the world y'all are watching from. If y'all could leave a like on the stream if you enjoy the content. If you're a new viewer, sit back and see if you enjoy it first before dropping a like. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so that way you get notifications. And if you're on Facebook, follow the page. Shout out to all of our members of the YouTube channel. Shout out to all of the supporters of the Facebook page that help me continue doing this work and continue going on. I don't have any sponsors or anything like that yet at this time, so everybody that chooses to support the Facebook page and the YouTube channel, y'all are the sponsors for Mercado Media. So thank you again so much for supporting independent media here. So first we're going to get into it, and the biggest updates coming out of Ukraine and the war in general is going to be the ongoing annexation attempts, and we have an update for that. Plenty of updates. We're going to go through a map breakdown. We're going to talk about if Russia is going to be mass mobilization, like actually declaring war on Russia. There's a couple articles on that. Lots of footage to go through today. I found lots of video from some foreign sources that have done very good journalism. They have on the ground reporters in Ukraine, so we're going to get to see a kind of an unfiltered non-mainstream look into some of these cities that have been liberated from Ukrainian forces as the counteroffensives are sweeping eastward. We got plenty of that to go through, and then of course we'll go through anything the orc hunters have shared to our Discord server towards the end. So starting with a map breakdown, going through everything that's changed within the war in Ukraine. Some news updates first. Urgent discussion on September 19th among Russia's proxies of the need for Russia to immediately annex Luhansk and Donetsk oblasts, much of the latter of which is not under Russian control, suggests that Ukraine's ongoing northern counteroffensive is panicking proxy forces and some Kremlin decision makers. The legislatures of Russia's proxies in occupied Ukraine, the Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics, which is the DNR and LNR, each called on their leadership to immediately hold a referendum on recognizing the DNR and LNR as Russian subjects. Russian propagandist and RT editor-in-chief Margarita Simonian spoke glowingly of the call, referring to it as the Crimean scenario. She wrote that by recognizing occupied Ukrainian land as Russian territory, Russia could more easily threaten NATO with retaliatory strikes for Ukrainian counterattacks, untying Russia's hands in all respects. This approach is very incoherent. Russian forces do not control all of Donetsk and Luhansk oblasts. Annexing the claimed territories of the DNR and LNR would, therefore, have Russia annex oblasts that would be, by Kremlin definition, partially occupied by legitimate Ukrainian authorities and advancing Ukrainian forces. And we go into it each night in the map breakdown, and Ukrainian forces have advanced now within the Luhansk Oblast. This counteroffensive that's taking place right here, specifically in the city of Bilo-Horivka, as the Ukrainian forces are advancing northeastward away from Seversk towards Lysychansk. The Ukrainian forces are advancing into Luhansk as they're trying to liberate that oblast, as well as into this northern region of Donetsk. As you can see here, from Sloviansk into Lyman, you got the Ukrainian counteroffensives that are advancing northeastward towards the currently Russian-controlled city of Lyman, and we'll go into that and break that down. But this part here, right here, that you see, like this portion, let me circle it. This tip of these counteroffensives are in Donetsk Oblast. This tip of Ukrainian counteroffensives is in Luhansk Oblasts. So if Russia is able to annex these two oblasts into the Russian Federation, that would mean that these counteroffensives and the Ukrainian forces that are advancing within them, liberating cities and territories, they'd be in Russian territory, in a sense, and that would give Russia more permissions for general mobilization, and it would just create a lot of new scenarios into the fold. But again, very, very unrealistic that this is going to come to fruition at Russia's hopes, because Ukrainian counteroffensives are just sweeping across the northeast and as well here in the south, and we're going to get into both of the actions that Ukraine is taking within the east and the south very shortly. Partial annexation at this stage would also place the Kremlin in the strange position of demanding that Ukrainian forces unoccupy Russian territory, and the humiliating position of being unable to enforce that demand. It remains very unclear that Russian President Vladimir Putin will be willing to place himself in such a bind for the dubious benefit of making it easier to threaten NATO or Ukraine. With escalation, he remains highly unlikely to conduct at this stage. So I do have a video update for the the Ukrainian controlled cities that Russia has, the Russian controlled cities within Ukraine that are planning to hold these referendums. I got an update from Sky News, who did a report here on the matter, and let's hear it. No sound? All right. I don't know why it does this every time. Thank you, though, for letting me know. We'll start it over. Thanks, chat. All right. Here's the sound. Here's the video sound.
Shaky mobile phone footage from Russian-occupied Zaporizhia. A faint chant of referendum and a sign saying "Together with Russia." In Luhansk, a show of hands in favor of a vote on joining Russia. Here in Kherson and in Donetsk too, even if this is not in their power to give, whatever Russia says.
From the very beginning of the special military operation, but also before it, we have been saying that people of relevant territories should decide their fate. The current situation confirms that they want to be the masters of their fate.
As far as Russia's talk shows go, these referendum are a done deal. Dubious statistics to suggest the majority will vote yes in 4 days of voting. And just in case, residents of Donbass who've fled or been forced to flee to Russia will be provided with ballot boxes here. What this means for Vladimir Putin is that he can claim this huge chunk of eastern Ukraine as his own and argue that any Ukrainian attack is a direct attack on Russian territory and must be defended with the full force of the state, whatever that takes. In the state parliament, legislation rushed through to expand the criminal code in circumstances of mobilization, martial law or war. Words avoided so far in Russia's so-called special military operation.
I think that actually for Putin, his bet is that the West, fearing that it can go too far and that they will face some nuclear risks, they will push Ukraine, Zelensky, to consider some retreatment.
But Ukraine is standing firm, and Western leaders are adamant there is nothing legitimate to this vote.
La Russie a déclaré la guerre.
Russia has declared war. It has invaded the region. It has bombarded it. It has killed people. It has made people flee. Now it is explaining that in this region it's going to organize a referendum. If it wasn't so tragic, we'd laugh.
The referendums will change nothing. It's an act of desperation for Russia, but it is not going to help them.
Vladimir Putin met with defense industry chiefs on Tuesday, telling them to ramp up production for his forces at the front, but no expected address to the people. Russian state journalists
Look at his own people right there. Hearing this report, but I'm trying to watch. Just not. I'm blocking this one. Let me show y'all. Just not confident. Heads down, looking bleak, looking grim for the leaders in the Kremlin.
Russian state journalists now say that will take place on Wednesday. Diana Magne, Sky News, Moscow.
Yeah, that's a good picture right here. All by myself. That's a good image of how things are going here. Vladimir Putin all by himself over there. His yes men right here in a line. So that's what's going on with the referendums that are the sham referendums that are taking place. It's not going to be recognized by anyone, but the response is increased consequences if Russia annexes parts of Ukraine, warns the US. This is supposed to be taking place this week. There will be increased consequences if Russia were to annex parts of Ukraine, a senior U.S. Department official said on Tuesday, as Moscow installed leaders in occupied areas of 4 Ukrainian regions plan to hold referendums on joining Russia. We have made clear that there will be increased consequences. We have a number of tools, the official said. Well, I hope that involves sending Ukraine Abrams, some A-10s, because I know we're switched out of A-10s. We can send them A-10s. And there's plenty of equipment that Ukraine can still receive from the DoD, from the US still, that we haven't sent Ukraine yet, including long-range HIMARS capabilities, the 300-kilometer HIMARS systems. So let's get back into the map update here in the full map breakdown. The Russian leadership may be running out of ways to try to stop Ukrainian forces as they advance across the Oskol River close to the Lugansk Oblast. So that's over here in the east. This is more of the newsier update before I go into the changes on the ground. So this is in reference to these Ukrainian counteroffensives here in the east. A willingness to abandon, The Kremlin may believe that partial annexation could drive recruitment of additional forces, both from within Russia and from within newly annexed Ukrainian territory. Russian forces are desperately attempting to mobilize additional forces from all potential sources to backfill their heavily degraded and demoralized units, but have proven unable to generate significant combat power. The latest annexation discussion also omits other parts of Russian-occupied southern Ukraine, in which the Kremlin was previously planning sham annexation referenda. A willingness to abandon the promise to bring all the occupied areas into Russia at the same time would be a significant retreat for Putin to make in the eyes of the hardline pro-war groups he appears to be courting. It remains to be seen if he is willing to compromise himself internally in such a fashion. The Kremlin's proxies in Donbass regularly place Kremlin messaging, on the other hand, and may have done so again as they scramble to retain their occupied territory in the face of Ukraine's successful and ongoing counteroffensive. Recent Ukrainian counteroffensive successes are further reducing and are already poor morale among Russian units that have been considered elite before the 24th of February. So even the elite units in the Russian military that are still attempting advancements in Bakhmut, that are on defense in Kharkiv, on defense in Kherson, they're already below poor levels of morale. Like, there's poor morale, and then there's Russian soldier morale. That's below that. That's where that is. Independent Belarusian media outlet Voktok posted images of intercepted documents left by Russian soldiers of Unit 31135 of the 1st Motorized Rifle Regiment of the 2nd Guards Motor Rifle Division as they fled Izium in mass. Right. So this is the Russian retreat. They used to be the Russian controlled city of Izium for the entire duration of this invasion. Right now, this is where it is, right here, and this is the Russian retreat back into the Lugansk territory over in the east. We'll zoom in on that and get a full. This is just part of the Newsyear update, but I'll give you guys a more detailed breakdown here shortly. Ukrainian intelligence claimed that 90% of the personnel of the 1st Motorized Rifle Brigade wrote damning reports on the state of morale as early as May 23, 2022. The 2nd Guards Motor Rifle Division is one of 3 divisions of the 1st Guards Tank Army, which prior to the current war in Ukraine was considered Russia's premier mechanized force, and it was Russia's key force in a large-scale conventional war with NATO. And Ukraine took them out. So that was supposed to be Russia's, like, the scary tank, the tank division that was supposed to rival something that we can come up with NATO, which is wild because there's so many tank units within NATO. Just within the U.S. military alone, just adding on the other countries within NATO. Especially now that Sweden and Finland are joining. Oh my goodness. Ukraine absolutely took them out. And so that's damning for the Russian military. The intercepted letters indicate pervasive morale issues among Russia's most elite units and the degradation of Russia's conventional capabilities against NATO. Just imagine if this sham referenda is going to happen, I imagine Abrams start getting sent to Ukraine here soon, and we start to see some M1s over there. We're already sending Ukraine MRAPs. We're not far off from Abrams here, and some more higher power capabilities. That is going to be a sight to see if we can get that over there. So the 2 main fronts within Ukraine at this time. War in Ukraine, day 211. There's 2 main fronts within Ukraine at this time. You got the southern axis, including the Crimean Peninsula. Okay, this is the southern axis. And then you have the eastern front in the Donbass, including Donetsk and Luhansk, right here. All right, so southern axis of Ukraine, which is from Kherson to Mariupol, including the Crimean Peninsula, and then Donetsk, Luhansk, and then a lot of the majority of the Lugansk Oblast here in the east. Let's start here with the eastern front. Zooming in from Izium down to Donetsk. Here's the Ukrainian-controlled city of Izium, and we're going to start with Ukraine's counteroffensives first. And then we'll give the Russian update on what the Russian forces are doing. There's still a couple areas in which the Russians are attempting advancements and are attempting to take territory. Not very many across the map, but there still is a couple of places. Here's Sloviansk. Ukrainian counteroffensives advancing northeast towards Liman. I think it's Liman, actually. I've been calling it Liman, but I think it's Liman. And then the Ukrainian counteroffensives from Seversk up into Luhansk territory, into Bilo-Horivka. That is the most recently liberated city here in the east. So here is Ukraine's counteroffensives. And let's get the update on what's going on here in the east. Ukrainian forces likely continue to consolidate their gains on the eastern bank of the Oskol River on the 19th. And if you don't know where the Oskol River is, it's a pretty easy reference because the majority of this front line, minus the few places in which I've labeled where the Ukrainian counteroffensives are advancing, those have advanced across the river. So those have actually got to the eastern bank, but the majority of this line is on the Oskol River. So it's a good reference point. Like, where is the Oskol? Along this line. That's where that river is the front line, if you will, minus a few places in which Ukraine has crossed on the map. So let me circle that. This is Oskol River. These unconfirmed Russian claims suggest that Ukrainian troops have continued limited and localized operations to cross the Oskol River and threaten positions on the opposing bank. A Russian source additionally noted that Ukrainian troops are strengthening their grouping in Kharkiv Oblast using Russian T-72 tanks, suggesting that the initial panic of the counteroffensive led Russian troops to abandon higher quality equipment in working order rather than the more damaged equipment left by Russian forces retreating from Kyiv in April, further indicating the severity of the Russian rout. And maybe we might have to add this video in. Shout out to editor Larry. I don't have it up right away, but just we've watched it a couple times now during the updates or on the streams of the overwhelming amount of Russian vehicles and equipment that have been left behind. We've seen it on every single day. I don't have it ready for the video right now, but we've seen it. You've all seen it that have tuned in, and it's just more of the same. The Russians left their equipment and vehicles up in the Kyiv Oblast when Ukraine won in Kyiv and rid the Russian soldiers, and the Russian soldiers retreated to the east. And now it's a similar happening here as the Russian forces left the Kharkiv Oblast into Luhansk. They left a bunch of T-72s and working condition vehicles that now the Ukrainians are using to assist their counteroffensives. Ukrainian forces likely continued offensive operations along the Liman-Yampil-Bilo-Horivka line on September 19th. Donetsk People's Republic head Denis Pushlin claimed that fighting is ongoing in Yarova, 20 kilometers northwest of Liman, confirming that Ukrainian troops likely advanced eastward from previously captured positions in Svitoritsk. So that would be right here. Okay, let me move the green. That's this location. I'm going to draw one more line so you can see what that's talking about. Here's Svitoritsk and the Ukrainian advancement here. I can zoom in on that. Let's zoom in on that. Okay, here's the city of Svitoritsk. I'm going to circle it right here. Okay, you got the Ukrainians are advancing eastward, trying to connect these two counteroffensives together. So you got the counteroffensive coming up from Sloviansk here, right? And then you got the counteroffensive advancing east from Svitoritsk, likely gonna connect these two ongoing counteroffensives, which will significantly help Ukraine surround Liman and be able to advance on the Russian-controlled city of Liman here. All right, so that's what that's talking about, is these two counteroffensives linking up in the east, right here. So let me circle where that region is. That is right here. Geolocated combat footage confirms that Ukrainian troops have retaken Bilo-Horivka, which lies along the Donetsk-Luhansk Oblast border and within 20 kilometers of Lysychansk-Severodonetsk area. So that is here. So it is confirmed. It's been double, triple, quadruple confirmed now that the Ukrainian forces are within Bilo-Horivka and have liberated that city. So that's going to be, let me clear this out. That's going to be here eastward. Here's the town, the Ukrainian city of Seversk. these counteroffensives advancing up eastward into the now the Ukrainian-controlled city of Bilohorivka, and the most recently liberated Ukrainian city in the area. The Ukrainian troops are trying to take as much territory back as they can here to assist in their counteroffensives on Lysychansk. Lysychansk is a huge city, very strategically advantageous city. It's on a hill, it's on an elevated plain, and that will help if Ukraine can get this city back. They can launch a lot of artillery to places in Luhansk Oblast. Again, they're on a hill here. So like Severodonetsk is beneath Lysychansk, like on an elevated level, right? That just gives Ukraine an advantage over lots of these cities within Luhansk. There's already been cities within Luhansk territory near Nizhnya Duvanka here, that's within Luhansk, that have already been striked by HIMARS. There's already HIMARS systems. Ukraine's advancing their HIMARS further eastward here in the Kharkiv Oblast, allowing Ukraine to hit targets within Luhansk, and that's going to continue. So 2 locations in the east in which now it's been triple, quadruple confirmed, geolocated for sure, no doubt, that Ukraine has liberated the city of Bilohorivka. Okay, and then also the Ukrainian forces have advanced eastward from the Ukrainian city of Svitoritsk as these 2 counteroffensives are trying to conjoin, and this is in Donetsk Oblast. Okay, and if I have to do it again, or I'll do it every stream if I have to. I know it's confusing for viewers that might not be in Eastern Europe or those at the United States. Like you hear the city of Donetsk, the city of Luhansk. There's a oblast called Donetsk, there's an oblast called Luhansk, and the Ukrainian forces are in a mix of 3 oblasts. You got the Ukrainian forces in Kharkiv. They have about 30 to 35 kilometers left to go along this front line to be able to completely liberate the remainder of the Lugansk Oblast. Okay, so the Lugansk Oblast goes and stretches over here. This is just loosely, right? It's not perfect with the lines. So that's the Lugansk Oblast border. All of this, this is what's this little red pocket here, this red strip is what remains. This northern tip now I'm going to do, maybe I should do a different color. Let's make it darker. Let's go like purple. That might change it up. So here's now Donetsk. The Donetsk Oblast border. And then over here. Okay, so that's Donetsk, and that's the Ukrainians are advancing within that border. And then everything else over here to the right of the 2 of the blue line and the purple line, because again, blue line, Kharkiv Oblast, purple is Donetsk. This is all Lugansk. Okay, all of this here is Lugansk or Luhansk Oblast, and the Ukrainians are advancing within this as well, right here. That's where the advancement from the Ukrainian troops from Severodonetsk into Bilohorivka is. So this is Luhansk, this is Donetsk, this is Kharkiv Oblast. Okay, so the Ukrainians are advancing within 3 oblasts in this little area alone. In response to that, the Russian effort, the main Russian effort within eastern Ukraine is the capture the entirety of Donetsk Oblast, the claimed territory of Russia's proxies within Donbass. So let's see how Russia's doing still in their efforts in the east. The 2 main efforts from the Russian military is going to be from Popasna onto Bakhmut. Let me try to find a good. This is probably, I'll do a zoomed in for both. I'll do a zoomed out so you can see all of it, and then I'll zoom in on Bakhmut and Advidka. So here's the 2 main efforts for the Russian military here, the advancements onto Bakhmut and the advancements from Donetsk south of Advidka, on Pitsky and Marinka. And then I'll highlight where Bakhmut and Advidka are. Still Ukrainian controlled, and this is the only area in which the Russians are attempting advancements. This is it. These 2 cities, and keep in mind it's taken the Russians 3 weeks to advance a few blocks down here south of Advidka, whereas it's taken Ukraine now a week to. It took Ukraine 3 days to clear the majority of the Kharkiv Oblast, and now I mean it's continuing. They're still advancing up further. to give you an idea of how much time it's taken Russia to take this little pocket down here, and then you can see what's going on north. So Russia's main effort in the east. Russian forces continued ground attacks south of Bakhmut on September 19th and 20th. The Ukrainian General Staff reported that Ukrainian troops repelled Russian attacks around Mykolivka, Druha, which is 18 kilometers south of Bakhmut, Kruja-Marivka, which is 20 kilometers southwest of Bakhmut, Zadetsiv, which is 12 kilometers southeast of Bakhmut, and Vasilia Dolna, which is 8 kilometers southeast of Bakhmut. Russian sources claim that Wagner Group fighters took control of Donbasskaya 750 electrical substation, about 12 kilometers southeast of Bakhmut, though the study of war cannot independently verify the claims. Russian forces additionally fired on Ukrainian positions along the Bakhmut and Adviivka Donetsk city front lines. Several Russian sources claim that Ukrainian troops are conducting counteroffensive operations southwest of Donetsk city near the border of eastern Zaporizhia Oblast, but the study of war still cannot confirm those. So that is down here and around Vuhledar and other places. There still has not been any way to independently confirm what the Ukrainian forces are doing down here and what their plans are. So we're still keeping up to date on that. Still haven't forgot those that knew about the troops massing in Vuhledar, as I guessed that they'd likely try to shoot south towards Mariupol to try to cut that E-58 ground-landed communication off, so that way Russia can't resupply Kherson. That hasn't happened yet. There's been multiple reports of Ukrainian forces massing there, but there haven't been any big sources to be able to be like, yeah, the Ukrainians are doing stuff there. So it's still just some information, but nothing really to be like a solid answer on what's happening there. Study work cannot independently confirm the claims of Ukrainian counterattacks in western Donetsk Oblast, but growing concern amongst Russian sources regarding Ukrainian actions may prompt Russian forces to reallocate forces. So no matter what, whether it's something legitimate or not, this might prompt Russian forces to respond to what's happening here in this region, right? So that, and the Russian forces have responded all throughout their entire front lines in the east and the south, responding to what Ukraine is doing. Russia's very much in response mode right now. They're not in the aggressor seat. Ukraine is in control. They're in control of Russia's actions right now. And that is it. So just ongoing Russian advancements or attempts to advance onto Bakhmut, south of it and north. So I'm going to zoom in on that, show y'all a better look at what's going on in Bakhmut. Here's the Ukrainian-controlled city of Bakhmut. The Russian forces are coming out of Popasna. It is the Wagner private military contractor. So here's the city of Popasna. The Russian advancements. You got directly onto the city and just south, and you can see Zadetsiv is back in. It's claimed to be back in Russian control. So that city is fighting between Ukrainian and Russian forces. This city right here is going back and forth. It was in Ukrainian control, I think, a day or so ago. It is now at least claimed to be in Russian control, and this is one of the main areas in which the Russian forces are still attempting advancements. They're still attempting to try to take territory here. They haven't stopped, despite what's going on directly north, right? So here's what we're looking at here. This is a zoomed out look at what we're looking at. Here's Popasna. Here's the lines I drew for the Russian advancements. So despite the Russians still attempting here, you have the massive Ukrainian counteroffensives that are happening just north of this. The Russians have not pulled their forces away yet to go assist in Luhansk. I'm guessing that might happen when Ukraine closes the gap in Kharkiv Oblast and they're able to liberate the remainder of this strip of the Kharkiv Oblast, and when they're touching the border of Luhansk, when the Ukrainians liberate Liman, because that's going to happen, and when they advance up north into this northern pocket of Donetsk, the Russians may move their soldiers into Severodonetsk and some of these cities within Luhansk to defend it from the Ukrainians advancing north of them. Because then if they're able to take this pocket in Donbass and Lugansk, I'm just going to draw a line to give you an idea, the Ukrainian forces will be over north of all of these Russian attempted advancements. If the Ukrainians are able to even just get to this line, right? If they're able to liberate all of this red space and get to the blue line I drew on the screen with their attempted counteroffensives, that's going to put what's going on here in Bakhmut at an even greater risk than it is right now. And this is taken months, weeks upon months to just take the incremental amounts of ground that they're getting in Bakhmut, the slow gains, and the faster that Ukraine goes here and continues to liberate this territory, the more of a strain it's going to put on the attempted Russian advancements just south of Bakhmut, and similar in Avdiivka, because the Russians are doing the same strategy on Bakhmut as they are in Avdiivka and as they did on Severodonetsk and Lysychansk. They have failed for nearly 10 years to advance directly onto the city. So they're having to go around the city, if you will, or go underneath or go north of it, try to surround it. Similar to almost what the Ukrainians are doing on Liman. It's the same. So Russians are doing a strategy on Bakhmut and Donetsk where they're hammering the city with artillery. I'm not sure if that's exactly what Ukraine's doing from Sloviansk on Liman, but Russia hammers the city. They can't advance directly onto it because their ground forces are terrible, so they can't actually advance on the ground. So they have to go into the least defended territories, like if they're trying to flank the city to the north and to the south. They did that in Severodonetsk and Lysychansk. They had to advance to the north and to the south of it and kind of go around it to try to pinch the Ukrainian forces, and they've been attempting this in Bakhmut and Avdiivka all summer long since they got up to this front line. They've been trying this for weeks. Ukraine's attempting the same strategy on Liman, just north of it, trying to go around Liman, because the Russian forces have strong defense lines from Sloviansk to Liman. So you can see in this pocket, the Ukrainians are trying to go around Liman as well, so they can advance from other directions. Nothing else to update. There's nothing to update in the city of Pisky or Marinka in Donetsk. Just that the Russians are still attempting advancements, right? And that's the Russian update in general. The Ukrainian forces have had success taking further territory from the city of, from the city of Svitoritsk, advancing eastward to connect these two counteroffensive lines onto Liman. It has been quadruple confirmed now that the Ukrainians have control over Bilo-Horivka here as their counteroffensives are advancing into Luhansk Oblast towards Lysychansk. And the Russians here in the east on Bakhmut and Avdiivka, well, at least on Bakhmut, I didn't see any reports on Avdiivka yet, but that doesn't mean that it's just stopped. It's just on a day-to-day basis. The Russian forces are still continuing their attempted advancements on Bakhmut. All right, so that is it for the east. Now we're going to go into the south with Ukraine's counteroffensives and any activity that Russia is still doing from the Russian forces. So here's the Ukrainian-controlled city of Mykolaiv, Kryvyi Rih, Nikopol, Zaporizhia, Odessa. These are the main Ukrainian cities here on the southern axis. And then you have the Ukrainian counteroffensive directions. Here is the Ukraine counteroffensive directions. And I'm going to highlight the main Russian-controlled cities at this time. Kherson, Novokhovka, Melitopol, Berdyansk, and Mariupol. And this line just represents that the Russians are defending Kherson here between Mykolaiv and Kherson. The Russians are not attempting any advancements in the south whatsoever. This pocket over here, this little pocket in Bakhmut and Avdiivka are the only two locations on this entire map right here in this circle. In that green circle, the entirety of Ukraine, that the Russians are attempting to advance within the country. Like they're still in invasion mode, trying to take cities. Everywhere else in the country, Russia is on defense. Ukraine is on the offense. Ukraine is in the driver's seat. Everywhere else within the country. So Ukraine's counteroffensives in Kherson. Let me take a drink. My voice is getting raspy. Ukrainian military officials maintain their operational silence regarding the progress of Ukrainian operations in southern Ukraine on the 19th, noting that Russian forces continued efforts to improve their defensive positions. So again, with the southern offensive, even with the east, they're being very, very cautious and are taking operational security into mind with their information being released. A lot of it is open source information. A lot of it is coming from the Russian mill bloggers, because ironically, sadly, the mill bloggers, despite their pro-Russian ideology, they're for what's happening. They are in a twisted way giving the most reliable information, because they're not happy with what the Kremlin's doing in Ukraine based upon their failures, and they're actually reporting on Russian failures and being, in a sense, kind of truthful about Russia's. Not all of them, but a few of them have been, and it's not good for the Kremlin. It's causing a whole bunch of infighting. It's causing the Kremlin, and specifically Vladimir Putin, to throw his own Ministry of Defense under the bus, and his own generals and his own military-minded. I don't even know why Shoigu hasn't completely just left Russia completely at this point. Shoigu led the Russian forces in Syria, and even he's been taken out of command like a couple times now. Russia's lost multiple, almost 13, 14 generals dying with soldiers in the front lines and likely a trench, which is just unheard of. Again, I was served in the U.S. Army. I couldn't imagine like just being a soldier as a private or whatever I was. I mean, I ended my military my military career as a sergeant, but being a specialist or a private out there and having a general right next to me, like that would be just something wild. I couldn't even imagine that, unless it's like a dog and pony show day and the general's coming to visit. We got to like look all extra nice and everything's extra clean for the day, and it's just a pain in the ass. But I couldn't imagine like doing operations with the general next to me. Like that's just unheard of. Satellite imagery and local reporting confirmed continued Russian efforts to repair damage to ground lines of communication inflicted by Ukrainian strikes. Satellite imagery released on September 19th depicted Russian operations to repair damage in the Novokhovka Dam from the 16th to the 18th after Ukrainian strikes partially collapsed the bridge over the dam on September 2nd. So the Russians are still attempting their repairs on the two bridges. Let me highlight where those two are in green. You got the Antonivsky Bridge here and the Novokhovka hydroelectric dam, right? And the two green marks, the two green tick marks on your screen here. Ukraine is almost waiting for the moment when Russia starts to repair or place pontoon bridges, and then they hammer them with HIMARS or artillery or mortars. It's like they're waiting at this point. Ukraine sits back. Oh, okay, well, they're repairing today. Now we'll send HIMARS. Ukraine and Russian sources identified 3 areas of kinetic activity on September 19th, northwest of Kherson City near the Ukrainian bridgehead over the Inhlowets River, and in northern Kherson Oblast near Oleny. Russian mill bloggers reported that the front line did not change northwest of Kherson City on September 19th, and that Ukrainian official sources reported that Ukrainian forces consolidated their tactical positions along the front. Russian mill bloggers claim that Russian forces repelled Ukrainian attacks near Godosliv and Bezmeny in the Davdiv bridgehead, but the study of war cannot verify these reports. So that is the Ukrainian advancement in this pocket. That's this pocket here. That's the furthest, I'd say, into the Kherson Oblast now. There's been reports that the Russians have repelled that, but there's nothing to suggest that they have, or nothing to verify that they actually did repel the Ukrainian advancement. Ukraine's Southern Operational Command reported that Ukrainian troops repelled Russian reconnaissance groups in Arkhangelsk, which is in northern Kherson Oblast region. Geolocated social media footage separately confirmed the presence of Wagner private military company fighters in Arkolanensky on September 19th. So the Russia's got its best private military contractors within the region. That's likely why Ukraine's being very strategic with what they're doing here in the south. They're hitting Russian munition, they're hitting bridges, they're hitting vehicle, motor pools, bases, key Russian pieces of infrastructure in the south, and it's just a completely different than what they're doing in the east. Now, as Ukraine is reallocating their artillery and getting fresh supplies and medical ammunition in the east, it's interesting to see what's happening here in the south, as it seems like the Russian forces, like their morale is completely diminished within these cities here in the south after Ukraine has just completely what's happened in the east. The image speaks for itself. Ukraine completely taken 45 kilometers of land back within 3 days. There's infighting taking place within the Russian forces, within Kherson. In the east, you got the Wagner fighters fist fighting with the Rozgavyrda. You got the Chechen forces having ground fights with the Popasna fighters. There's just a lot of infighting going on, and it's just kind of like that emoji where you got the eyeballs and the swirls for eyes. That's like what the Russian military is in a lot of Ukraine. It's just like, whoa. Like they're just, Ukraine's got them on their heels. Ukraine is in the driver's seat right now with what's happening in the east and in the south together. So the main Russian effort for the south, what's happening in the southern axis for the Russian forces. Russian forces did not conduct any ground attacks in Zaporizhia Oblast west of Huliopol and continued routine shelling against Ukrainian positions on the 19th and 20th. Ukraine's Zaporizhia Regional Military Administration reported that Russian forces shelled critical infrastructure and residential areas across the oblast. Ukrainian Zaporizhia Regional Administration head Oleksandr Shtarka reported that Russian S-300 missiles struck a transformer substation in several villages in central Zaporizhia Oblast. Official Ukrainian forces reported several Russian strikes on Mykolaiv city and the surrounding areas on the 19th. Ukraine's Southern Operational Command reported that 6 S-300 missiles and 3 Smerch multiple launch rocket system rockets struck industrial and civilian facilities in Mykolaiv city on September 19th. Local city authorities reported that Russian strikes damaged several buildings and a segment of the city tram network. So, just in response to the Ukrainian counteroffensives, it's going to be S-300 missile strikes in central Zaporizhia Oblast. So that's going to be strikes around this region, likely including Polohi, Huliopol, Tokmak. But this is about where central Zaporizhia Oblast is, and then you have Russian forces launching S-300 missiles along the Mykolaiv city here in the southwest of Ukraine. So that's it. Russian forces are not advancing at all. They're not even attempting to advance. They're only responding with artillery strikes on civilian infrastructure within the south. And that is it for the Russian troops. That is it for the south in general. So you got the Ukraine forces still attempting their advancement southward. There's been reports from both sides that there's definitely kinetic activity happening in Davdiv Brid. I'm going to double triple circle that. That's this region here from both the Ukrainian sources and Russian sources. Russian forces reporting that they repelled attacks. Ukrainian sources saying they didn't. Regardless, that means something is happening in Davdiv Brid, right? Regardless if it's successful or not, both sides are reporting that there's kinetic activity happening there. So that is about it within the south. Ukraine continues to hammer the key infrastructure, the bridges that Russia is trying to rebuild, because Ukraine destroyed the Antonivsky Bridge and the Novokhovka hydroelectric plant. So Ukraine continues to hammer those. They continue to hammer key infrastructure They have an operational silence right now, trying to stay ahead of Russia in the information battle, in the operational security battle. Ukraine's trying to stay ahead of Russia, so it's a lot of information still isn't coming out like it was, but it's still very much a ongoing situation. The counteroffensives haven't slowed down. It's just information is in a trickle mode right now. Russia's responded by launching missile strikes in central Zaporizhia and in Mykolaiv, and that's your update for the southern axis of Ukraine. Next, I'm going to get into the updates for mobilization and force generation efforts. So Russia still has not full-on mobilized their units into Ukraine, but they are recruiting within desolate villages, the smallest cities in Russia, way far away from like Russians in Moscow or St. Petersburg, that likely have access to Western media or information that isn't all just propaganda, like a lot of the little desolate cities within Russia. That's where Russia's pulling a lot of their forces from all corners of Russia, not in their main cities. The effective size of volunteer units in Russia can generate is likely decreasing. Republic of North Ossetia Alania head Sergei Malenko announced the formation of a new combined volunteer detachment on the 19th. Yalio said that the detachment will be primarily made up of reservists and combat veterans, and that some of the detachment is already within training, and that the detachment will be fully formed by the end of September to deploy to Ukraine. Detachments vary in size, but by definition smaller than the volunteer battalions that Russia regions originally organized. A Russian mill blogger separately claimed on September 19th that an unnamed combined company from the Donetsk Autonomous Okrug deployed to Donbass after completing training in Murmansk. Russian forces have used steadily smaller echelons as their main tactical units, moving from battalions to companies and in some cases just platoons, dramatically reducing the combat power the new units bring. Russian occupation authorities are attempting to mobilize additional forces from Ukrainian civilians in Russian-occupied territory. Ukraine's main military intelligence director reported on the 19th that Russian forces are failing to mobilize additional forces from occupied Luhansk oblasts, and that local occupation officials failed to meet a 500-person quota for mobilization in Severodonetsk to replenish the depleted 2nd Army Corps, the armed forces of the Lugansk People's Republic. The GUR also reported that Russian occupation officials held a meeting in occupied Mirny, which is in the Kherson Oblast, to discuss mobilizing local Ukrainian men to fight on Russia's behalf. The Ukrainian Resistance Center reported on the 19th that occupation authorities rounded up all men under 40 years of age in Pokrovsky in Mariupol Rayon for forced mobilization. Pokrovsky is not part of the pre-February 24th borders of the Russian proxy Donetsk People's Republic, and therefore would not have provided the DNR units for the invasion. The Ukrainian Resistance Center also reported that women in Alvachetsk, within the pre-February 24th borders of the DNR, rioted and tried to block a busload of mobilized men from leaving the town. Russian forces are likely funneling low-quality Russian nationals derived from prisons or forced mobilizations into the already low-quality 1st and 2nd Army Corps, which are made up of DNR and LNR proxies, respectively. Ukraine General Staff reported on the 19th that Russian forces set up a training facility in Terez, also known as Chayetskov, in Donetsk Oblast, to train personnel recruited from prisons who will then be deployed to supplement the heavily degraded 1st Army Corps. So it's not going well for the Russian forces. I mean, it's the news itself of what's happening within Ukraine is enough to let you know that, but the specifics on these units that are coming into Ukraine, they're not even able to meet their quotas. They're severely under-trained. They're severely under combat effectiveness. They're recruiting reservists and veterans, so that's not even like active military to go fight within an active combat operations within Ukraine. It's just it's not good at all for the Russian forces here in Ukraine. And it's only going to continue to get worse. It's not going to get better. It takes a long time to train one troop. And the way that they're training these volunteer units to go into Ukraine, they're basically giving them a magazine, a fully loaded magazine. One guy gets a magazine, one guy gets a rifle. Go out there and fight in Ukraine, essentially, with promised pay, with promised bonuses and all of these incentives, and they aren't receiving them whatsoever. So that's your full map breakdown. Anything you would like to see changed of the map within Ukraine, anything you would like to see to these updates, please leave a comment below and let me know what you like from the map updates. Thank you guys again. If you enjoyed the map breakdown, leave a like on the video. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel and you're following us on Facebook. Next, we're going to go into the video breakdown, going through some video that has come out within Ukraine in the last day or so. And we got Ukrainians return home in towns recently liberated from Russian control from PBS NewsHour. So this is more on the ongoing liberations within eastern Ukraine, and as cities are liberated in eastern Ukraine, we're seeing what life was like under Russian occupation. So here's more on that from PBS NewsHour.
Ukraine says that hundreds of thousands of people have been freed from Russian control in recent days in an offensive that has reshaped the battlefield. The counterattack began at the end of August. Ukraine publicly emphasized the southern region of Kherson, but troops have made more gains in the Kharkiv region, where officials say there are still pockets of fighting. In the past week, Ukraine has retaken more territory than Russia took in the past 5 months, and they've recaptured dozens of towns. Nick Schifrin traveled to an area recently seized back. He found people returning to their homes and others mourning for all that was lost.
The road north of Kharkiv is littered with the remains of a Russian withdrawal. This used to be the front lines, but in the last few days, the Russian military pulled back and the Ukrainian military advanced. It's now once again Ukrainian held, recaptured at great cost. All up and down this road, you could see signs of the battle. That was a market. These two places, believe it or not, sold travel insurance to visit Russia. And across the street, a restaurant, a cafe, and a money exchange. And now that Ukrainians have gained access to this territory, they're going to see what the Russians left behind. We drove toward the Russian border with prosecutors and crime scene investigators looking into Russian war crimes. Along the route, mostly empty roads and mostly empty villages. One of them, Ruska Lazova. It had a pre-war population of more than 5,000. Today, it's in the dozens. So this is the first time you've been home since the invasion. 37-year-old Vladimir Soloha invited me into his home he hadn't seen in 6 months. There's some damage, but he's lucky. The house is intact. It has no electricity or water. Wow. It's exactly the way they left it when they fled. His 18-month-old daughter's crib, his 6-year-old daughter's toys, drawings of a more peaceful time, as they were the moment the invasion began.
I woke up at 4:30 and the shooting began, very loud. I ran back into the house, grabbed our kids, got the stuff that we could grab fast. We got into our car and left, and that's it.
And why did you come back today?
Our army, the armed forces of Ukraine, pushed the Russians all the way to the border, so it's more or less safe here. So I decided to come here to feed my dog and feed my cats. I found my dog, but we also had 3 cats, and I still don't know what happened to them.
Wow.
He checked the outside shed, the backyard, even the side room of the garage. Finally, cat located on the roof. After 6 months of scrounging for food, it finally gets fed. But its owner's hunger for peace remains unsatisfied.
My wife and kids won't return here until Russia stops shelling Kharkiv completely, because that's still what is happening every day. There are still strikes every day, and it's not safe to come back.
We head further north to within 8 miles of the Russian border. Ukraine's recent success allows Kharkiv police to reach areas that until this past weekend were too dangerous. But in the past, Russia's left behind booby traps, so the bomb squad checks a discarded car and the area around it for tripwires or unexploded bombs. A few feet away, an unexploded mortar round, a reminder of the fighting that only recently ended.
Wow.
Once it's all clear, the crime scene investigators go to work. In early March, a Ukrainian family was driving this car north when they were attacked by a Russian machine gun. The car then caught fire. They comb through the debris looking for human remains. All that's left, small bone chips. And rescued from the mud, a reminder of the lives lost, a watch. Alexander Klochko is the CSI team leader.
How important is this kind of work when it comes to documenting Russian crimes here?
It's very important because all of these documents will be further submitted to the Office of the Prosecutor General of Ukraine, who in turn will send them to The Hague for further prosecution to bring the perpetrators to justice.
Klochko's office is in Kharkiv City. It was destroyed by a Russian rocket yesterday.
When we hear the stories of what happened here, and when we get on the site and see the tragedy inflicted on these people, of course it's psychologically difficult, but we're holding out.
And then here is 65-year-old Anatoly Khropach. He is not a soldier, nor a police officer. The man and girl who were killed in this car were his son and granddaughter. Anatoly on the right, his son Andriy on the left. Anatoly with 9-year-old Ksenia.
She was a schoolgirl, 9 years old. She used to dance and do figure skating.
Businessman.
He was an entrepreneur. He traveled a lot. And everything is gone now.
When you look at this scene, how do you feel? What are you thinking?
Horror. Horror. What can you say? It's been half a year already, but still... I don't have the strength.
The whole family was in the car, Andriy and Ksenia on the right. But remarkably, Olena and 17-year-old Misha on the left survived and made it to Germany. We spoke to Misha today online.
Russia now is a terrorist state, and I think that the whole world should know what this country do with me, with my family, and with my country, with Ukraine. Because we were just civilians and they were soldiers. For what my father and my sister died? For what they were just a civilian?
Will getting these remains, will working with this team from the police help you find some kind of closure, some kind of solace?
I think yes. I think yes. But this is difficult.
Difficult, perhaps impossible, to ever understand what Russia has left behind. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Nick Schifrin.
So the sombering reports just continue as much as the Ukrainian counteroffensives are good news and they're good for morale. And they're good for the Ukrainians to continue. It's still heartbreaking to see what's left behind after the Russians retreat from their occupied cities that they're saying that they're liberating, by the way. Russia's saying to the world, and nobody believes it, but they continue to say it anyways, that they're actually liberating these cities. And as you can see time and time and time and time again, evidence after evidence after evidence, that they're just completely destroying the cities. They're torturing the civilians that live within these cities. They have no interest in it's just complete atrocity. Retaking Kharkiv, is this a turning point in the war? This is a report from BBC on the Ukrainian counteroffensives that are ongoing within the east. First, I'm going to give you a thanks to everyone that during the map breakdown, I did forget to let y'all know. Thank you so much from Rose for the super chat. Thank you for all you do to keep us updated. Thank you, Steve, for the $7 super chat. Thank you, Lewis, for being a member. Thank you, Paolo, for the $21 super chat. For Popcorn, for properly enjoy Putin's speech. I think he's going to be speaking tomorrow, probably after Biden. We can tune into a little bit. There's some leaders that are talking at the UN General Assembly right now, and it's all focused on Ukraine. Good day, Mark. Good luck tonight. From an Australian, thank you so much. Thank you from Revenge. And then Christine, support for your channel. Thank you so much, Christine and Mick, for that. So this is back in Kharkiv. This is from a BBC report. Is this the turning point in the war?
As the tide of Russian forces has been pushed back, this is what's left behind: hundreds of graves. Ukrainian authorities in Izium exhuming bodies. They say perhaps as many as 400 on this site alone. Exactly who they are or how they died is so far unclear. However, the Kharkiv regional government says they're certain they found evidence of war crimes.
There are many children. There are bodies with hands tied on their backs. Each of these facts will be investigated, and they will get a legal review. Still, all of this can only testify that the world has to acknowledge that this is a genocide of the Ukrainian people.
The map of ground retaken by Ukrainian forces over the last week makes startling viewing. Some military experts believe Russia will struggle to adjust to what's just happened.
For a Russian priority, they need to reset a defensive line on ground that they can actually defend. And that's critical because Ukraine has the momentum, it has the initiative, and actually it has the operational art that we've seen from this very daring operation in the east that probably has been far more successful than the Ukrainians even thought. But what is clear, and it has been clear since the start of the operation in February, is that Russia just does not have the troops to try and achieve what it wants to militarily in Ukraine.
Vladimir Putin was in Uzbekistan yesterday, meeting some of the few world leaders who'll still take his calls. The Chinese president may have greeted his Russian counterpart as "my dear old friend," but this is not a relationship of equals, and China may be having doubts.
I don't think it's entirely clear to them whether to have the Russians as a friend is still all that useful to them. It seemed quite obvious from Putin's opening remarks that he was talking from below to a superior. We know you have questions and concerns. That's not how friends speak who are equal.
As the scale of Russian losses intensifies, there isn't a ready pool of quality equipment or recruits with which to replace them. These pictures, verified by the BBC, show the leader of Russia's Wagner group of mercenaries addressing civilian prisoners in Russia. In return for 6 months military service, he tells them they'll be set free.
The biggest sin is desertion. No one backs down, no one retreats, no one surrenders.
This does not suggest a military with many options, at least not good ones.
It shows the desperation that Russian forces are under just to increase the personnel that can fight in Ukraine, which is okay on the defensive side, but the offensive requirements and training requirements are completely different. So they're still going to be in a very difficult position if they want to go on the offensive and try and take back territory that they've lost.
Mr. Putin told reporters today that his military plan in Ukraine is working, but warned that the conflict could, quote, get more serious.
The Kyiv authorities have announced that they have started an active counteroffensive operation. We'll see how it goes and how it ends.
But what keeps Western leaders up at night is what Vladimir Putin might do if he feels that the Ukraine fight is becoming hopeless. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has triggered consequences well beyond the battlefield, from energy to geopolitics. How Russia, how the West, how the world emerges from this, and how soon, is still shrouded in gunsmoke.
All right. Report from the BBC News on... Oh, we're going to get to that. Report from the BBC News on the turning point in the war and Russia's inability to replenish its own troops that are just complete cannon fodder for Ukrainian counteroffensives, right? So the Ukrainian counteroffensives are ongoing, and Vladimir Putin's military is depleting completely. China wondering why the hell we even have allyship with Russia. Like, what does Russia even offer or bring to the table at this point? Because they're losing everything in Ukraine right now. So this is a longer video, about a 17-minute long video, but this YouTube channel, Homoradsky, they're a foreign media, so I got the subtitles on, but they do an excellent job of reporting within Ukraine. And we watched a couple of their updates, and also they have like documentary style reporting, and they don't copyright strike, which a lot of these other sources do. So they do a good job. We can react to it. So again, full credit to Homoradsky YouTube channel. The city of Kupiansk in the Kharkiv region was occupied by Russian troops on February 27, 2022. Due to the city's proximity to the border, the Russians occupied it almost without fighting. After 6 months of occupation, Ukrainian troops entered Kupiansk on the morning of September 10th. The city was liberated by the 92nd Kharkiv Brigade, but unlike liberated Balaiklia and Izium and many other settlements, which, due to the speed of the counteroffensive of the Ukrainian army, found themselves in the rear and finally heard silence. Kupiansk, on the contrary, have appeared on the front line. Homoradsky visited the city on the 15th. At that moment, the left bank of the Oskol River, which separates Kupiansk and Kupiansk-Vlazovy train stations, was under the control of Russian forces, and the right bank was under the control of the Ukrainian forces. Because of this, artillery duels, tank battles, Glad rockets, cluster bombs were clearly heard. All of this continuously flew over the heads of residents of Kupiansk. So on the map, now at this point, so when this report was being conducted, when they were out there, the Russians still had control of some of Kupiansk, and now at this point, Ukraine has full control of the city of Kupiansk. So that's up here in the Kharkiv Oblast. I'm going to zoom in on it. Here is the city of Kupiansk, and here's the Oskol River, which separates Kupiansk and the Kupiansk-Vlazovy, Vuzlovy, as the Ukrainians have advanced to the eastern bank of the Oskol River. So let's get this full report from Kupiansk. Again, credit to Homoradsky for this. Oh, first, Revenge gifted 5 memberships. Josh, Vitaly, Karen, 427, Kevin, and Stan. Revenge just gave out some memberships. Thank you.
Отже, ми в Куп'янську, це от зірваний міст, тут насправді вже передова на тому боці річки. І бачите, тут чути, що ще все дуже і дуже гучно. Пішли.
Здесь Куп'янск поделен примерно процентов 70 освобождено, но еще здесь присутствуют орки.
Ну, оце наша половина, а за мостом це вже їхня чи як?
Ні. Наша половина це все, вони там уже, ми їх відігнали далі.
Дайте, пожалуйста. У нас снаряд лежить отут. У сараї все, що зелена хата. Нет. Она может детонировать. И вот тут женщина лежить. Мы не знаем, что с ней делать. Нет. Під себе ходить, но ми не можемо її підняти. А в цій хаті, отут в сараї, снаряд лежить. Можеш його якось розмінірувати.
Не взорвавшийся, да?
Нет, не разорвавшийся. Вот он в сарае.
Таких снарядов, ну, разминирование как? Разминирование как будет происходить?
Не
его
знаю.
нужно взорвать. То есть так...
Давайте, ой, спасибо.
Вот возьмите.
Да не, їсти есть.
Бери.
Спасибо. А сигаретку?
Сигаретку? Ну, домой ще что-то. Щось поділимо.
Спасибо вам большое.
Скажіть, як тут вообще в Куп'янську дела?
Як в Куп'янську дела? Честно сказать, я не знаю, я очень боюсь, все стреляют, все этот. Очень страшно. Я взагалі хочу до своїх дітей. У мене діти живуть в Івано-Франковську. Я хочу до своїх дітей, до своїх внуків. Чесно. Я не знаю, мені була 2 дні назад зв'язь. Сказали, що дочка мені гуманітарку чи этот.
Сегодня уже на Купянск поехал автобус вот, забирать людей.
Ну,
Так що на днях вас вивезуть, не переживайте.
мені сказали, що діти привезуть волонтерів і що мене до дочки і до внуків. Я хочу до дочки і до внуків.
Там, понимаю,
чесно.
конечно.
А ви весь час були тут?
Весь час були тут. Ми ніде не працювали. Все, що можна з хати, я вже все попродавала. Все продала з хати. Все, що можна. Остався в мене тільки телевізор і холодильник вдома. Все остальне я міняла, телефони міняла на хліб,
Ну, давайте
усе.
тримайтесь, бо небезпечно зараз тут.
Спасибо вам.
Кстати, знаешь, что самое печальное? Когда ты в посадке, в туалет сидишь такой и начинается обстрел, и ты такой думаешь, блядь, ну что именно сейчас?
Че такая тупая смерть, да?
А туда ваши 2 бойца пришли?
Ой, в здании.
Сейчас они вернутся.
You can still hear the artillery in the background this entire time. Again, this was while the Ukrainians were liberating the city of Kupiansk. It's now in full Ukrainian control at this point, so keep that in mind. This was a report that was done 5 days ago. It's now in full Ukrainian control, but this was when Kupiansk was on the front line still. It still is in a sense, but at least they have the Oskil River now to if for some reason the Russian forces mount a counteroffensive to the Ukrainians' counteroffensive, and at least now they have that Oskil River they can fall back to because they've advanced to the eastern bank. That's likely not going to happen. The Russian forces are not going to do that, but just in case, now that this, at least this part of the city, is not like on the very front lines.
Не вижу ни чтоб летело, ни...
The numbers on YouTube are how long you've been a member for. So it changes every month, every 2 months, 6 months, 12 months, 1 year, and 2 years.
Фух. Трішки стріляють щось.
А, місцем диви. Як їздили на пацики на моцику.
Хорошо.
Так, зелененькие, даже под веточками, чтобы нас рисовали с дрона.
Це адміністрація?
Ну или ДК там. До забортика двигаться не будем, наверное, да?
Воно там ще висить. От наскільки зараз небезпечно, наприклад, по 10-бальній шкалі?
По 10 на 12. Я думаю, где-то так. Снайперы не работают?
Що, як обстановка? Що, кажете, злобили же, чи що?
Да, они говорят, что немного...
Oh man, y'all are making the chat light up tonight. Thank you again so much, Martin, for that $50 super chat bomb, man. That really helps. I got my truck towed this morning as I forgot to move it from the lot out there, because I don't leave here. Like, I sit here and stream, so my truck just sits out there most of the time, and I forgot to move it. $300-some bill today. That really sucks. So thank you guys so much.
Подготовились, что мы их выгоняем отсюда. И вот где-то вот эта сторона, они еще там сидят.
Да, там он, дочка живет за мостом, можно нам сходить туда?
Ну если вы пройдете, потому там же работают и те, и наши, и ихние.
А их где?
Ну, то вся сторона ихняя.
Так вчера говорили. Военные говорили вчера, что зачистили.
Зачистили уже?
Ну,
вчера
туда шли на зачистку.
Вчера выходили, да, я слышал. Я знаю, что наши заходили туда. Ну, пойдите, попробуйте, но очень-очень аккуратно лучше.
Ну, можно проходить.
Ну, попробуйте. А где тут вниз спускайся и...
По мосту. Сразу мосту.
По мосту.
Это Донецкая, там где-то улица.
Донецкая?
А ну, сейчас.
Що, як ви тут живете в цей час?
Та от ж бачите як.
Так і живемо.
Ночі не спимо.
Зв'язі нема.
Как дела?
Хуёво, Вась. Вась, хуёво.
То наши стреляют.
Хуй его знает, кто тут стреляет.
Так получается они на той стороне, да?
Повтори.
Хуёво, блядь.
Оль, наверное, не піде.
Та, наверное, не підемо.
Та ти що?
Все, двигаемся к технике.
That was very close to them. You saw, wow.
Погнали. Слышь, давайте от администрации.
That's that garbage billboard poster that the Russians put everywhere. It says we are a one Russia. It's been, many of those have been Molotoved or destroyed. But we are a one. We are a one people with Russia.
Да. Нихуй тут стоит.
Считаю примерно сколько секунд она летит и куда она падает. В зависимости. Если вы слышали выход и приход почти сразу.
То есть близко,
это
да?
означает, что недалеко.
Проведіть мене.
Та,
Бо я
ні.
боюся.
Та проводите.
Та проведіть, будь ласка.
Дивіться, я вам так скажу. С военными ходить опаснее, чем без них.
That's fact. He's not wrong about that. More dangerous. It is. Yeah.
Сейчас какой-то дрон.
Wow, though. Imagine that. You can't even walk through your own neighborhood without fear of getting hit with artillery.
Добрий день.
Як ви тут?
Ой, страшно, хлопці, дуже страшно.
А ви весь час не виїжджали нікуди?
Нікуди не виїжджала, весь час тут було.
Подвал у вас тут хороший?
Нема в нас
Нема?
підвалу.
А что
Нема.
вот здесь? Вот это что за подвал?
А то комунікації.
Вы туда не прячетесь, не?
Ні,
Чисто в квартире?
чисто в квартирі. А в мене мама на Мічуріна. Оце ж треба їй 85 років, треба збігати, глянути, що вона там. Я коли в неї ночую, коли в квартирі
А
ночую.
там частний сектор?
Да.
Так може б легше там би було, в частному секторі, чим в домі?
Та я трохи там ночую, трохи тут. Воно ж теж...
А там погреб є?
Нема.
Дивіться,
яка вулиця?
Мічуріна.
Мічуріна?
Та це ось рядом, ось отак рук і вниз.
уже с сегодняшнего дня заезжают автобусы вывозить людей. Не хотели бы уехать
Та бабушка
на
в мене ж
некоторое время?
не ходяча.
Саша, что, кто нырнул в подвал?
Пресса.
Пресса, давай вытягивай их, собираться,
Так
пока
можно
они
что еще?
отстрелялись.
Ну, зови.
Можно
Мы в больницу едем или нет?
А не видно. Ну давайте отойдем дальше. Тут ветки мешают, вот. Відділення екстреної невідкладної допомоги. Куп'янська тема.
Тут ви зараз, в принципі, на волонтерах тримаєтесь.
А?
Зараз на волонтерах тримаєтесь, так?
Нет, ну и департамент нам кое-что перебрасывает. Потому как с департаментом не было у нас ни связи, у нас и сейчас нет связи. Как связываться? Это наше экстренное отделение неотложной помощи. Вот идет старшая сестра хирургического.
Those that stayed back in the hospital, heroes that stayed back and didn't leave.
Отделение, которое и старшая, и младшая.
Да, ми тут
Добрий
уже
день.
неділю живемо. Добрий день.
І як?
Добрий день.
Як? Ну, страшно. Больних жалко. Пытаемся отправить их подальше туда, де не стріляють.
У нас проводятся эвакуации, но у нас пациенты не всегда могут сидеть. С этим все и связано. Спецтранспорт нужен.
Такого-
Вот старшая сестра оперблока, она же старшая,
Добрый день.
Здравствуйте. Она же младшая,
Она же все разная.
разная.
Як ви? Втомилися?
Ну, уже 10-й, какой же, 9-й, мы уже сбились по счету. У нас только 2 операционных медсестры осталось, а все остальные поуезжали. И 2 санитарочки. Все, больше никого. Поэтому здесь живем.
Ви намагаєтесь до когось дозвонити?
Пришел Водафон, я хочу позвонить сыну.
Все, не отвлекаем. Нам привезли солярку от волонтеров. Вот, питаемся только лишь генератором. Снабжения электрического нет, канализации нет, воды нет. Персонала где-то 20 человек.
А раніше
на
було
100
скільки?
больных. Раньше было у нас до 900 человек общего персонала.
Wow.
А зараз 20.
20.
Went from 900 on staff down to 20. There's only 20 viewers there.
Все, кто как бы остался здесь, работаем бессменно,
Скільки ви спите?
по-всякому.
Ну, ви
В зависимости от поступлений. Ну, бывает 2 часа, бывает 3. Аж работать.
І це вже тиждень, так?
Да. Город разделен на 3 части. Все 3 части между собой сообщались с путепроводом. На данный момент путепроводы все перебиты, разрушены и нет сообщения. Такая же больница работает и в поселке Ковшаровка. Там тоже такая же ситуация. То есть
А вона ще окупована чи ні?
она, мы не знаем, оккупирована или освобождена. И связи никакой нет. Я вот живу там, я уехал оттуда. И
На роботу.
Да. И я остался здесь.
А там у вас рідні,
Да,
сім'я?
у меня там, да,
І ви не знаєте, що з ними?
не знаю. Передаю привет.
Жах.
І ви встигаєте допомогти?
А есть выбор.
То ви кажете,
You hear
десь
that? One more time with that. Do you have time to help? Do we have a choice? That's the morale. That's the motivation. I just hear that with the soldiers too, with the medical personnel, with the soldiers. People, the reporters ask, I mean, do you have time? What's your morale like? What's you feel like? They don't have a choice but to wake up and continue. If they don't, Vladimir Putin and the Russians would have taken their whole country.
А есть выбор.
то ви кажете, десь 25 поранених. І тяжкі.
Ну, это вот за последних день.
Сейчас оплатим, уберите тарелочку.
Мы одна больница полноценная, которая сейчас оказывает помощь на всей территории, ранее оккупированной. Одна. Те больницы не работали, мы работали одни. Понимаете как? И всех везут по этому же маршруту пациента к нам. Мы последняя база, которая здесь выполняет свою работу.
Але у вас немає транспорту, ви вивезти?
У нас транспорта нет.
Ясно. Добре, дякую. Це прильоти чи виходи?
З'явився зв'язок, так?
Да, МТС. Ну,
Мы даже рентген сделать не можем, я же что говорю.
Не знаю, что с мамой. Алло.
Скажи ему, что ты нормально, ты сюда едешь, а как там едешь, доехал чи нет?
Не вдалося дозвонитися?
А?
Не вдалося дозвонитися?
Не?
Ні, не вдалося.
Тут так и тоже, не удалось дозвониться.
На, і може вона ще раз попробує. Спроси, волонтери вивезли
Бачите,
маму?
не отправил ни хера
Или
сообщения.
ні? Та я ж не можу на сообщение не позвонити.
Ну, ни хера.
Бо є же должен этот волонтер перезвонити Дніпру,
Я понял.
якщо вивезуть. А чи вивезуть, чи ні? Так, все, пошли,
Все,
образуйте.
иди кайф, вам не мешаю.
Як ви жили під час окупації, тут поставили якогось керівника. Лікарні? Чи вас не чіпали?
До определенного момента нас не трогали. До августа месяца.
О, довго.
Мы держались.
А потім когось поставили. І де ця людина зараз? Втік.
Я не знаю. Почему? Потому что я здесь. Где кто, понимаете, как каждый за себя. Здесь мы все вместе, а там...
Нас ніхто не трогав, фізично не
Нет, нас никто не трогал абсолютно. Относились нормально, все хорошо. И...
Ну просто оно не наше.
Да, не наше.
Ну и вообще.
Не наше.
Да. Тяжело было, морально тяжело было. Наша земля, наш город, нас построили. І взагалі ми їх сюди не звали. І не хотіли. Ну, коротше.
Але мер ваш зразу зрадив місто. Перший зрадник. Що ви про це думаєте?
Ну як, тут палка о двух концах, можно так сказать.
С одной стороны, он город сохранил и людей. Тут я не знаю, как в этой ситуации. А во-вторых, никого ж не было. Мы ж с палками не выйдем, понимаете? Никто ж. Уехали ж все. Ну а что, мы ж не будем. Никого ж не было, ни полиции, никого. Все поуезжали. Все.
What do you guys think of the mayor, of those that were the mayors that surrendered to the Russians right away? What a topic of conversation. To what, like, if they saved a lot of their people doing so, but in Ukraine they're going to be looked at as traitors. The mayors of these cities that surrendered to the Russians and kind of were like more open to them, their people weren't as hurt. What a mess to ponder that. I'd like to hear you guys' thoughts on that in the comments.
Остановились в центрі, стояв БТР, бахкали в воздух. Ми дійшли до моста, ми виходили, від горисполкома йшли туди. Кричали геть, геть і все остальне. А що ми
Що ми зробимо? Ми ж нічого не зробимо.
У нас тут не було вояк. Не було їх. Навіть якщо вони привозили, вони їх одразу забрали. Чортами.
Да, они сразу
Ви маєте на увазі
возили.
російських
Да,
військових?
да. Мы оказывали помощь, но мы медработники. Мы обязаны помогать всем.
Я вважаю, що ми не зрадники.
А що я? Вона у нас самобойова.
Ми дві подружки з одного відділення. І ми 6-ті сутки тут. Седьмые. Ну, 7-є сутки. Воюємо.
Я, правда, домой сходила, їсти наварила. Вона зараз знову прилетить.
Николаевич, едем? Погнали.
В Куп'янську ужасно, страшно і взагалі капець. А тут передова насправді, це не Ізюм, і українські військові намагаються відігнати росіян далі, і ви бачите, що відбувається. І тут дуже сильно стріляють, і люди тільки зараз відчули, які звільнені, що таке якби війна, тому що коли їх окуповували, це сталося тут фактично без боїв.
So credit to Hormadsky for that, the YouTube channel, exclusive footage from Kupiansk. Kupiansk is now under Ukrainian control completely, so that was video footage from 5 days ago. The report was just posted 19 hours ago, but the video is coming from 5 days ago while the Ukrainians were still fighting over it, still trying to liberate the village. It is now under Ukrainian control. Here's another report from Hormadsky, same exact news. They do a really good job. Took all cattle and kicked us out of the house. Vitskopilia. So this is in the Ukrainian city of Vitskopilia. Let me look up exactly where this is on the map so I can show y'all. So we just got Kupiansk. This is going to be just to the south of Kryvyi Rih in Ukraine. Let me pull it up on the map so you can see. This is south of Kryvyi Rih, Ukrainians' counteroffensive directions in the south of Ukraine, advancing southward. So this is one of the reports. I haven't seen too many reports coming out of the south in some of these cities that are being liberated in southern Ukraine. So here's one from the city of Vitskopilia. On the war map, that's going to be up here. Right here. Do I need to circle it so y'all can see it a little easier? Because we're pretty used to the war map. This is in this northern pocket of the counteroffensive south of Kryvyi Rih. Let me circle it with the blue. Vitskopilia is right here on our map. Here's the video.
Вони як прийшли, вони оце грабували.
Забрали худобу, забрали хазяйство, поїли усе. Ну, перві, як вони тільки зайшли, вони ж голодні були, як собаки ті.
А це ось пулями вистріляли його просто. Вибили і все.
Почали нас забирати машини, забирати, в магазинах все позабирати почали.
І полки всі були повні товаром.
За півроку ми привикли.
Громадське у Високопіллі, що на Херсонщині. Півроку це село перебувало під російською окупацією. На початку вересня ЗСУ звільнили Високопілля. Тут досі чути вибухи, але місцеві все рівно повертаються до своїх рідних домівок.
До повномасштабної війни у Високопіллі жили більше 4 тисяч людей. Нині, після російської окупації, там лишилося близько 300 мешканців. Увесь час, поки ми знімаємо у селі, по Високопіллю прилітає щонайменше 3. Один з таких прильотів змушує нас падати на землю. Водночас місцеві, котрі повернулися до села, продовжують займатися своїми справами.
Не страшно вам зараз тут перебувати? Тут досить гучно.
Та ви знаєте, за 2 місяці я як тут, мені все вже. Я вже знаю, куди воно летить, де воно це і куди ховатися, так що вже не страшно.
Було тільки що 3 прильоти, ви кажете. Ховалися?
Ні, я ходив на трактор, дивився, куди воно там упаде, бо там же ж хата ж моя.
Це ви просто почули, що воно десь туди летить?
Ну так, воно далеко, воно як свистить високо, то чуть, що високо. А як вже воно приземляється, то воно свист такий громкий. От тоді ховатися треба.
Ви виїжджали, не виїжджали?
2 місяці я жив з ними тут.
З росіянами?
Так, 2 місяці я жив, а потім вже не було жити, тому що вони вже взагалі тоді обнагліли так, що забрали худобу, забрали хазяйство, поїли усе. Ну, перві, як вони тільки зайшли, вони ж голодні були, як собаки ті. То я тут по Степній вулиці жив, якраз оця ж ця, що до князя.
They ate up all his food and just...
То вони мене з дому вигнали, я жив.
Kicked him out of his own home, looted his own property. That's the Russian military.
У людей. А за худобою, вправлявся, ходив. Ну, а потім сказали, що все. Техніка їхня понаїжджала і худобу порозпускали, все це. А потім прильот прийшов там, де я жив, у двір. То
до сусідів, там, де ви не ваш будинок, а...
Ні, там мій будинок порозвалений геть повністю. А там, де ми жили, туди приход якраз прийшов. І тоді в мене теща, виходить, їй 80 років. І це на велосипеді ми через дорогу таку, через жовту туди. І от так ми виходили. Ну, а 5 числа, як вже освободили, то ми сюди і приїхали.
The Z stands for the Eastern Military District because Russia is in the olden days and they don't have communications capabilities within their military, so they had to paint all of their vehicles with a letter to identify their forces that were invading Ukraine on the 24th. So the Z was a common image from the Eastern Military District because they were around Kyiv and the capital of Ukraine. And so Russia propagandized that and turned that into like a rallying cry for Russians that are sympathetic to Russia's ideological reasonings for invasion. So that Z really means cannon fodder, honestly, because most of the units that have been destroyed, captured, some of the worst performing units have had the Z on their vehicles, but that it's just a propagandized identifying indicator on the vehicles that Russia used. The Z just means Eastern Military District, but Russia propagandized it.
То тепер все, допомагаємо поставити на ноги, хоч оті те, що сохранилося.
Як іменно ці прильоти, то вже орієнтуюся. Якщо стекла дрижать, значить це десь пів кілометра. Якщо вже хата дрижить, значить вже тут 200-300
То це воно значить, що
метрів.
впало вже. А як оце летить і свистить, то ви чуєте,
Да,
в
воно
який
ж,
бік?
ви тільки що стояли. Я вам сказала, що там буде. Воно вже посвистіло. По свисту воно определяється. Якщо вже замедлений свист, значить десь рядом. А якщо так пішло, воно по свисту чуть. Ми вже орієнтуємося. Я не знаю, ми вже
Ви
якось...
так спокійно про це кажете.
За півроку ми привикли. Перший же ж день вони як прийшли, вони оце грабували. Магазини, больниці. У нас не працювало ні магазини, ні больниці. За 3 дні вони оце газове, взагалі газу в нас не стало. Світло в нас ремонтували хлопці під бомбьошками. 3 рази вони ремонтували, а потім сказали, що неможливо, тому що дуже багато поривів.
Literal orcs. That's why we call them orcs. Shout out to the orc hunters. Just looting immediately, just stealing, came and took everybody's personal belongings, had parties in the backyards of homes. Just
Це в марту місяці чи в березні місяці нас оце не стало. Оце вже прильот. В марту місяці оце в нас не стало. Ні газу, ні світла, ні, отам впало. Летить.
Ой, це десь.
Ні, туди. От ти почула, так?
Да,
Воно далі
летить
і туди.
Це Марія Олександрівна, ми з нею вже познайомилися там. Приємно.
Кришу це ми накрили, не докрили. Це мій син. Саша, йди сюди, синок. 22 березня ми уїхали звідси того, що в нас діти, і ми виїжджали, боялися. Малі діти, одному дівчинці 4 рочки, а хлопчику 9. Ми їх вивезли в Кривий Ріг, тому що вони дуже боялися, плакали. Ми ночували місяць у підвалі. До цього, поки ми виїхали. Почали нас забирати машини, в магазинах все позабирати, почали всі матеріали, там, які були у нас техніка. Ми торгували, у нас свій магазин. Ми торгували битовою технікою, веломоту у нас, дуже багато у нас було техніки. Це все у нас забрали, вивезли, немає нічого.
Прильот був прямо сюди в балку. Перебило 2 балки. А сама міна, часть міни попала, аж в дом залетіла через кришу. Потолки всі попадали, так що дощ намочив.
Ви зараз перекриваєте?
Зараз перекриваємо пленкою.
Оце ось наша така дорога. Ми її називаємо фронтова. Бо це опасно для життя. Опасно для життя. Їм треба десь заховатися, десь заїхати треба. І Саша, йти теж десь ховайся.
А от ми все время хотіли сюди залізти, а сестра понабивала шурупів, щоб понакручували з чоловіком, щоб не можна було туди залізти. Так вони то гепали і не вибили.
Там була сітка, і вони
решетку вирвали.
Танкою вирвали. Казали люди тут очевидці, що вирвали танкою. Підкотили і вирвали. А це ж все дергали, стріляли, все побите.
А ви його казали, що трохи спочатку працювали, а потім вирішили закрити магазин, так?
Вже поїхали, бо вже не можна було. Вже нам не розрішили тут не ходити, не їздити, не машинами. Сказали, сидіть вдома і нікуди не виходьте. І ми вже все перестали працювати.
А лишалися якісь речі в магазині?
Повний магазин був. Тут у нас була і техніка, і битова техніка. Ми торгували всім. І мотоциклі були в нас, і бензопили, бензокоси, запчастин дуже багато було. Всього в нас тут було. А що ж таке, де ключ? А що ж таке? Хтось ковиряв?
Може хтось ковиряв? Може хтось ковиряв. Хтось ковиряв його вже, хотіли відкрити. А це ось пулями вистрілили його просто. Вибили і все.
Вау.
Тут було битова техніка, всякі інструменти, перфоратори, болгарки, дрелі. бензокоси, бензопили. Да. Тут були рибальські снасті, вудочки, все для рибалки. Тут були запчасті для мотоблоків.
Yes, this is inside their workshop.
А там шлема стояли, ці полки всі були повні товаром. Магазин самі строїли. 8 років проробили в ньому. Тут було багато інструменту, нема навіть ключика ніякого. Ні одного. Винесли все. Просто пусті полки. Нема нічого. Поки будемо в Кривому Розі. А відновлюватися будемо. Будемо тут жити. Це наша домівка.
Completely ransacked their shop.
Все одно вернемо.
Воно кажеться, що хай воно таке, в такому стані, але воно якось своє. Понимаєте, я 4 місяці був в Кривому Рогу, якщо я не привик до городської життя, я не міг там просто бути. Мене так тягнуло сюди.
There's just some outstanding reports from Hormnatsky, first in Vitskopilia and in Kupiansk, showing the aftermath, the liberations of these cities, and what the civilians are still going through within these cities, recovering after the Russian occupation. Here's John Sweeney in his war diary from day 207. He's a little off on his days there. Little off. He's been absent, but it's okay. War Diary Day 207, the elephant torture from John Sweeney. Orange hats in the chat.
Troops have liberated Izium in the east, and they discovered a torture chamber.
He should be back in Ukraine at the end of September, so in a week or so.
In the torture chamber was a Russian army gas mask. And that gave me flashbacks to an investigation I did for BBC Radio back 22 years ago for a radio documentary called Victims of the Torture Train. And in this I talked to a series of young Chechen men who had been tortured by the Russian army in 2000 during and after the Second Chechen War. And they told me and I interviewed them separately, that a routine torture the Russian army used was the slon, or elephant. And what they did was that they would take a captive, handcuff him behind his back, and then put the gas mask on. And it's called the slon because the trunk feeding to the filter looks like an elephant's trunk, so they call it the slon, the elephant. And they unscrew the filter and then squirt CS gas up the filter or trunk, and that leaves the captive to start drowning in his own snot.